Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you all are doing well. Today I'll show you how you can use Python to talk to your AWS S3 data store. We're going to use a library called Boto3, and then we're going to look at some of the more common operations that are essential to using S3 in Amazon. I'm going to have all the timestamps in the video for the different operations that we're going to learn about. So feel free to browse around if there's one particular thing that you're looking for. If you're looking to learn all the set of operations we're gonna go through, then I would recommend watching the video from the beginning up till the end. At first, I'm gonna run you through what S3 is and what are the different terms you want to know about, and then we're gonna go ahead and delete all the code over here and write everything from scratch. So let me go ahead and delete the code first. There you go. And then let me show you what S3 dashboard looks like. So the most high-level concept in S3 that you have to know about is called a bucket. A bucket in S3 is similar to a database in any other databases, right? So it's the super high-level construct that you want to know about. All the data you put in is going to be in the bucket. So over here you see we have a bucket called Boto tutorial bucket. This is going to be the bucket we're going to be using to put all the data in. Over here you see something called objects. Objects are individual pieces of data within a bucket, right? So you can see we have two objects over here. One is called burger.jpg and the other is also a JPEG from Unsplash. Right now I have two JPEGs. However, the way S3 is structured, in a given bucket, you can have whatever data format you need to put in, right? So you could have a bunch of CSV files here, you could have MP3 files, you could have video files, log files, literally whatever you want to dump into S3, you can. So two terms, one is bucket, which is synonymous to database, and you have objects, which are the individual pieces of data. And then for the individual pieces of data, the name of the file is usually called the key. So over here, you can see we have burger.jpg, which is an object within the Boto tutorial bucket. And the name of the file, which is burger.jpg, is the key of the object. So those three are what you need to know about. So you have the bucket, you have an object, and then you have the key of the object. So essentially that's all you need to know to follow along in the tutorial. So now that I kind of went over the terms, let's go into the code and see how you can work with Python. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and import our client, which is going to be Boto3. If you don't have it, all you need to do is do a pip install Boto3. That should do it for you. Yeah, so now let's write our bucket name because we're going to be interacting with our bucket quite a bit. That's called Boto tutorial bucket. Perfect. And now the first thing you need is a reference to S3. So we're going to call it a client. You want to create a S3 client. For every operation, you're going to be using that S3 client. So all you do is boto3.client and then you give it the name S3. Now the variable S3 contains your S3 client that you're going to be using for all the operations that you perform. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is how do you list, give me 1 second, there you go, yeah. The first thing we're going to look at is how can you list all the buckets in S3 that you have. So all you have to do, we're going to store it in the buckets response. All you need to do is just do s3.list buckets. And then for every bucket in the response, which is going to be in buckets, you can print the bucket, right? So let's try running it. So over here, you can see we are getting all the buckets. The first one is Boto tutorial bucket. This is the bucket that we were looking at. But if I go one level up, you can see I had multiple other buckets over here. And for every bucket, you have a name and when it was created, just by using list buckets method. So very straightforward to find out all the buckets that you have under your user. All right, so that's the first thing. Now, the next is gonna be, how can you list all the objects in a bucket? Okay, so we're gonna go over and see how can you, for a given bucket, how can you list all the objects, which are all the files that you have in that bucket. So again, similarly, we are gonna use our S3 client, and the method you wanna use is called list objects v2. One required parameter that you have to pass in is called bucket, and to it you give it the bucket name, which is gonna be, in our case, this one. So let's at first go and check what we have in the bucket right now. This is our bucket, and right now we have two objects, right? Burger and Victoria. So we should expect to get these objects back when we call list objects v2, giving it the bucket name. All right, so we're gonna iterate through the response. Within the response, there should be a attribute called contents. We're gonna iterate through that and then print the object. Okay, so let's run it. So you see we get two keys. I'll zoom in one level maybe. There you go. So I'll just run it again to make it more clear. Okay. So we're getting two dictionary objects over here. The first one is the key burger.jpg, which is the file over here. And then the next one is the Victoria unsplash.jpg, the file over here. So you can see that we're giving it the bucket name and calling list objects v2. The response gives us an attribute called contents. And within that attribute, you will have each of the file as a dictionary. You are not getting the file back itself, you are getting metadata about the file. So yeah, that's the second operations that we have. The next one is gonna be a bit more complicated and I would say more common for your S3 use case. That's gonna be uploading a file to a bucket. Okay. So you can do it through the UI over here, of course. You could essentially do upload and then select a file. That works. But usually if you have an application, you're going to be doing all the uploading and downloading through code, right? So we're going to see how you can upload a file to a bucket. Okay. So let's see. To show you the structure, I do have three JPEGs over here. One is called burger, one is called cake, and one is called pizza. We're gonna use these three to kind of show you how to download files and upload files. All right, so with that being said, let's do upload file to bucket. Okay. All right, so the first thing you wanna do is open the file you wanna upload. So we're just gonna do burger.jpg, open it in the RB format, not format mode. We get an alias, call it F, and then all we do is S3 once again dot upload underscore file object. This is the method you want to use in order to upload a file. Okay, and then you give it the file itself, which is going to be F. You give the bucket name, which is going to be bucket name. And then you give it the key, right? So what name do you want it to be in S3? So we're gonna just call it, let's call it burger new upload.jpg. You don't see any file with that name right now. You have burger.jpg, however, you don't have a burger new upload.jpg. So to upload file object, you pass in the file, which we're opening over here. You give it the name of the bucket. This is the bucket you wanna write the file to. And then you give it the key, which is essentially the name of the file in S3 when it's uploaded. Yeah, and then you can give it some extra arguments. In our case, we're gonna give an extra argument, which is a dictionary where you give it a key value pair. In our case, we're gonna give a key called ACL and a value called public read. What this does is when it uploads the file, it sets the file's access control to public read so that everyone in the public internet can read this file. Of course, usually you don't want this, but for testing purposes right now, we're gonna use public read so that we can verify that the file has been uploaded correctly. However, later in the video, we're gonna look at a better way to do this without running into security risks. All right, so that's our upload. So let's go ahead and run it. So it's taking a while. We're gonna give it a second. It's done. And then now let's go to our dashboard and do a refresh. And there you go. You see your new file, burger new upload.jpg. If we try to open it, that's a pop-up. There you go. That is not how it works. There's the pop-up. So it downloads the file, and there you go. We get the burger, right? Another thing you could do, you get the object URL from here. You paste it over here. This downloads the file and opens it, and you get the burger photo right here. So pretty straightforward. That's how upload is working. We can go ahead and just keep it there for now. But essentially, no matter when you upload something, this is how you upload. One thing we could do is let's just get rid of the extra args. So you could essentially upload something like this. Let's give it with no access. That's going to be the name of the file. Let's see what happens then. Once again, we're uploading. It's going to take a second to upload. There you go. We're going to do a refresh. And you see we get a new file called burger new upload with no access. Let's try to access it. You click it and you're getting an access denied. There is a very cool way you can give temporary access to these files from your backend. We are going to look at that in a bit. All right, so we know how things work. I'm going to go ahead and delete these two for now. There you go. Okay, so we are back to having the two files we originally had. Okay, so that's how you upload a file to S3 bucket. I think this is the most common use case, uploading and downloading files. So hopefully this was helpful to show you how to do that. The next thing we're going to look at is, of course, how can you download a file? We looked at upload, now let's look at download. It's very, very simple. All you need to do is, once again, get reference to S3, and then the method you want to call is called download file. That's all. You give it the bucket name, and then you give it let me just go to here. So you want to download burger.jpg, right? So to that method, you give the bucket name, and then you give the name of the object, which is the key, right? So that's going to be burger.jpg. There you go. And the next thing you give is the name that your downloaded file is going to have. So let's just call it downloaded burger.jpg. To show you that this works, you see we have no file called downloaded burger.jpg in the file directory over here. So let's run that. And you see we just got a downloaded burger.jpg, which is our burger photo. Right, so this has just been downloaded. Let's go ahead and delete it. And now run it again. And you see we're getting the downloaded burger and the photo is right here. So that's how you download a file or an object from S3. Essentially, you need the name of the bucket, the name of the object within that bucket, and you give it a name that's going to be applied once the file is downloaded. But as you can see in this one, you're directly downloading the file in your file directory. You don't have like a bytes.io or a binary object over here to play around with, right? Because you can imagine a use case where we're downloading the file in an API endpoint and then returning the file, so the binary data, to the front end. In this case, you would have to open the file back and then send it. However, there is an easier way to do it where you directly have a reference to what you just downloaded in the Python code itself. So let's do that one. So that's almost exactly the same, except like a small change. So we're going to go ahead and delete the file. Okay. And the first thing we're going to do is open the file called downloadedburger.jpg. Okay. And then we're going to open it in write mode because we're going to write to this file as f. Okay. And then you do a download file object. Okay. Once again, you give it the bucket name. You give it the name of the object. And then you pass it the file, right? So you're essentially passing it the file over here. Now what this code is going to do for you is it's going to download the burger.jpg file from the bucket and then put it in that f variable so that you have access to the binary data of that object. And then you can like do some image manipulation. You can pass it back to the front end as binary data, or you can just save the file like our previous the download file method was doing. Okay, so we're gonna run it. Essentially, we're getting the file again, but now you will have f as a reference so that you can like put your code here to send image to front end. Okay, yeah. So we looked at upload. We looked at two ways of downloading. The next thing we're gonna look at is, I think, a very common use case, which is getting something called a presigned URL. Okay, and what do you use the presigned URL for? You use it to give limited access to an unauthorized user. So remember, we were using, where was that? When we were uploading a file, like over here, we were passing it access control called public read. Otherwise, it was getting access denied, right? The reason we get access denied with those is because by default, you cannot access the files from the public URL. Sorry, I mean, you can't access the file from the public internet, right? So instead, what you want is you want only your backend to have access to that file. And when the backend is giving the URL to the front end, instead of giving the URL, it's going to give it something called a pre-signed URL. So the backend is signing that URL and giving it to the front end, telling the front end you have X number of seconds or minutes to access this data. If you, let's say your time limit is 60 seconds, so you give the pre-signed URL to the front end, and your front end knows that I can access this resource using the URL for 60 seconds. However, after the 60 second, I won't have access to it anymore. So this is a very easy way to have private resources in S3, but at the same time give a limited amount of time where other people can have access to it. Okay, so that's gonna be very simple. We are gonna work with the burger.jpg file, or we might, let's just do it with a new file, right? So let's upload a file first. Okay, so let's do with open. We are gonna do, let's say, cake.jpg. We are doing it in the read mode, and then we're gonna do upload file object. We're giving it the file, we're giving it the bucket name, and we're giving it cake with default access.jpg. Okay, so let's do this at first. I'm just gonna run this one. We're gonna give it a second for the file to upload. There you go. We're gonna go in, refresh. Now let's see, so we have cake with default access, right? So let's go into it. Here's the object URL. We're gonna copy it. And then, I think we just lost our copy. Actually, we can just do this. We can just do open over here, right over here. It's open. And we do get the photo here. Now, why do we get it over here? Let's see. So if we go back, let's see. So if we go back over here, that's the object URL. Let's try it. Right. Because we're downloading it, right? You're allowed to download it. That's not a problem. So for, let's go back. Okay. So for the cake with default access, let's go into the file. And this is the object URL. This is the URL that your front-end code is going to be using to access the file. If we click it, you are getting access denied. That's because your browser, in this case Safari, does not have access to it. Your backend does, right? Your backend can just open the file, but your browser is being unable to go get the file. So how can you give access to your browser for a limited amount of time so that they can open the file? So we already uploaded the file. I showed you we're getting access denied. Now let's get a URL that your front end can actually access. So we're gonna do S3 dot, the method is gonna be called generate presigned URL. Okay. You give it the method. So we are getting the URL to go ahead and get the object. So we're gonna go ahead and use get object. And then you give it some parameters. Okay, so it's a dictionary with some key values. So the first one's going to be bucket, which is going to be your bucket name. The next one is going to be the key. Remember, the key is the name of the file you want to read, which is going to be cake. Let's see. So it's called cake with default access.jpg. Okay, so cake with default access.jpg. Okay, I'm gonna collapse it. So we're giving it the method, which is get object. We're giving it parameter, which is a dictionary of key value pairs. The first key is the bucket, which is the bucket name. The second key is the file that you wanna generate the URL from. And then the next one is argument called expires n. This is going to be the number of seconds that the client can access the file with this URL. So we're going to give it like 10 seconds. Okay. And then let's print the URL. Okay. So we got the URL. Let's copy it. And then let's paste it over here. Did we just run out of time? Let me just make sure we didn't run out of. Let's just give a higher expires in. Let's give it expires in 30 seconds. Okay. And now let's run it. Okay, let's go there. All right, so now you see we do have access to it. You could get it before we were getting access denied, right? So with this URL, we can go get it. So it's 30 seconds. We should be able to get it again. I'm clicking it, downloading, and we got it right here. Okay, so we're not getting an access denied. However, after 30 seconds, we should get an access denied with the same URL. So I'm gonna try it a bunch more time until we reach 30 seconds. So if you look at the URL, you see it has the access key ID and then a signature and then expires. This is what AWS backend uses to figure out whether the client has access to this anymore or not. And now we're getting access denied, request has expired, and the time when it expired. So this is a very good way to let your backend give signed URLs of your resources to the front end for a limited amount of time so that no user can abuse it by accessing private data. So this was another of the very common use case that you're gonna have. So hopefully you found this one helpful too. The next one we have are some of the more simple ones. So the first one's gonna be creating a new bucket. Okay. So we're gonna create a new bucket. Let's just call it bucket location is the variable, and then you do s3.createBucket. That's all you do. I'm gonna give it an ACL called public read. This is gonna make the new bucket totally public. And then we're gonna name it the name of the new bucket, right? We're gonna call it new destination bucket 777. Okay, let's just print the URL too. All right, sorry, it's gonna call it bucket location. All right, let's run it. So you see we got some metadata giving it like the request ID, HTTP status code, which says that the request was successful. You get the location, so the path to the new location. Now what we could do is go one level up, list our buckets by creation date. We're gonna do a refresh because I think this still has the old ones. Sort it. And you see we have our new destination bucket 777. And this bucket has no file. You can see it's publicly accessible because we put the ACL control to be public read over here. So that's how you create a bucket. You can customize your bucket as much as you want. You can give it very specific permissions. For our case, we just use public read to make it very straightforward. All right, so that's how you create a bucket programmatically. The last thing, or the second last thing we're going to look at is how can you copy objects between buckets. Okay, so we are going to do we even need a response? I don't think we need a response here. So we're going to do s3.copy_object. Okay, so for the new object, we're going to make it publicly readable. So public read ACL. We give it the bucket. This is the bucket that your data is gonna be copied to. So this is your destination, which is gonna be our new destination bucket, which is called new destination bucket 777. Okay, so that's your destination bucket. And then you have the copy source. Okay, the copy source is gonna be your bucket name that you're copying from / the name of the file. So we're copying that burger.jpg file. So what we're essentially gonna do is copy this burger.jpg, which is in this bucket, into our new bucket, which is called new destination bucket 777. Okay, so we have / bucket name, which is Boto tutorial bucket / the name of the file, which is burger.jpg. Okay, and the last thing you want to give it is the new key. This is going to be the name of the file in the new destination bucket. So we're going to call it copied burger.jpg. Okay, so what we're doing is we are copying burger.jpg from our original bucket into the new bucket called new destination bucket 777, and we're naming the copied file copied burger.jpg. Just to show you, right now this bucket is entirely empty. I'm gonna refresh and it should still be empty. There you go. Now let's go ahead and run that piece of code to see if it copies successfully. All right, so it seems like it ran. We're gonna go back and do a refresh. And you see we have the new file called copied burger over here. And if we try to open it, there you go. It ends up getting this file and downloading, which is called copied burger, and it's the exact same burger image. Okay, so that's how you copy files between buckets. Once again, we are using public read just to make it more easy to test, but you can customize these permissions as much as you want. All right, so the last thing we're going to take a look at is how can you get details about an object. So for that, we're gonna just do s3.getObject, give it the name of the bucket, which is gonna be in our case bucket name, and then the key, which is the name of the file. In our case, we're gonna get the burger.jpg. Okay, and then you print the response. So over here, you can see all the different metadata related to this particular object within that particular bucket. You get things like the size of the file, when was it last modified. You also get the body, so you could essentially go ahead and download the file, but we saw other ways you could download the file too. So this is a cool way to get some metadata, so you could essentially do something like list all the objects in a bucket, and then for each of the object, you could do a get object call to get more details about the object. So hopefully this was helpful. We went over multiple ways to upload files and download files. We saw how you can list all your buckets, how you can list all the objects within a bucket. We also looked at presigned URL, so how you can get a presigned URL to give limited access to an unauthorized user. And lastly, we looked at how you can create buckets programmatically, copy objects between buckets, and also get more details about an object within a bucket. So hopefully all these were helpful. I'm gonna add timestamps in the description and also in the video itself so that you can bounce around and only look at the content that interests you. I'm also gonna link this whole code in the description below, so you can find a GitHub link that you can go and take a look at the code yourself, or you can just clone the repository and run the code to see how it works. So hopefully all these were helpful. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. With that being said, I hope you have a good rest of the day, and I'm gonna catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.